Hi, good morning. This is Dr. Bill Clark, and welcome to Beyond Limits, where spirit meets science. You may have seen that I had started this podcast last year, I think last July, and I had put it on pause after November because from November until April, I was working with a branding agency, company called Brand Alchemy. Highly recommend these guys, by the way. To relaunch my personal brand and really kind of pivot and change kind of what I was doing in my career, in my life, that sort of thing. So this has been years in the making. So I'm excited that I'm relaunching Beyond Limits today. And this will be every Sunday about this time. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of cool stuff happening. So if you haven't been to my website yet, you can go visit drbillclark.life. And you'll see how I'm pivoting. So those that know me from the supplement industry, right, you'll see that I have a lot of other things that I'm working on as well. I'm moving back into public speaking in a big way. I do have another Spotify channel. You can find that on the website called Insights from the Soul. And this is a collection of audio recordings of talks that I've given previously. So in fact, today's talk is based on one I gave about 10 years ago, I think. About being the Changemaker. We'll get into that in a second. But go check out the website. You'll see that I'm moving back into public speaking. So if you're looking for a keynote speaker or that sort of thing, I can send you the speaking and media kit. If you're interested, just reach out to me. And again, subscribe on the website as well to follow along, because this year and this next 12 months is going to be super exciting. And why is that? So first, my first book's going to get published. Actually was putting the final touches on that yesterday, so super excited about that. I've been sitting on this for some time, and it's the first book is called Divine Whispers, Poems of Love and Spirit. And it's a collection of poems that I compiled. I started writing years ago, but poems I didn't start writing until 2009. So this is a collection of poems that I wrote from 2009 to 2024. So it spans years of deep inquiry, surrender, awakening, healing, and in this process of writing these poems, it's really, I'm just the channel for that. That's why we call it Divine Whispers here. I think it's kind of cool. But it was during those divine whispers, those moments of heartbreak and love and silence, and science actually, joy and revelation were all part of my journey into this spiritual union with the divine. So those that know me in the industry know me as the PhD chemist or scientist, but that's the theme of the genre that I've been talking to for years, and that's where spirit meets science. So it's really my journey as the scientist who came into a spiritual awakening decades ago. It was massive and then changed my life forever. The other thing that's really cool that's coming is I'm preparing for my TED Talk, my first TED Talk. So this is exciting. So I wanted to get, obviously, re-ramp after the launch of the brand, Beyond Limits podcast, but also ramping up to the time of the talk, which will probably be a little later this year, sometime in the fall, is what they're telling me. And prior to that, there'll be 2 books published, so not just Divine Whispers. That'll be coming out. I think we'll have it out there. It's going to be ebook. It'll be out on all the ebook platforms in the next week or 2, I'd say. And then the second book will be out before the TED Talk. So that is titled The 5 Keys to Unlocking Your Spiritual Awakening. Great story behind all that. We'll save that for another podcast. But it's something I did a workshop on years ago, and it became one of my books. And now it's the theme for my TED Talk. So stay tuned for notices about that. Again, subscribe on the website, and you'll be able to follow along with all that. So today's episode is really about stepping into being a change maker. All right? And what does that mean? So I'll just, you can quote this, but this is one of my quotes. And it says, "Change is inevitable. Suffering is optional." Change is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And I love that because that kind of captures the essence of our lives. We are these spiritual beings having a human experience and not the other way around. And so as humans, we want to resist change. I mean, we'll fight it. Well, I've done it myself. You don't want things to change. You want everything to stay status quo the same. But this isn't how we really embrace our lives from a spiritual standpoint and expressing ourselves to the fullest extent of who we are in the world, right? So, and you've obviously known many change makers in history, throughout history. There's tons of people that we could look at that have been big change makers. But it doesn't have to be big like that. It can be just things that you're doing in life. So for me, big change, and most recently, was obviously making this pivot in my supplement industry to be a tech entrepreneur. So I'm developing an app. We're going to launch that later this year that's going to be targeted for consumers, helping them find the right supplements based strictly on the science. No hype, none of that noise there. So, and I intend to transform our industry. We have too many products on the market. Most of them don't deliver on the benefits they claim. So we're gonna change that, and we're gonna put the power back in the hands of consumers. So that's a huge change for me. So I'm not really focused on doing innovation or still doing consulting in this area in clinical research, but my main focus in my industry is that. And then of course there's the change with finally after I think I started journaling back in the 90s as when I started journaling. When I was kind of this inkling of this spiritual awakening was on the precipice here, which happened in 2000. And then after that, my life changed dramatically, right? And so when we're faced with change like that, of course, we want to resist that. So what really called me to be a change maker? Okay, that's a great question. And it's something you can contemplate as we talk about this. For as long as I can remember, I've never fit into any traditional roles, okay? Even in school, there was like the cliquey groups. I wasn't any of those. I was pretty much on my own, a loner. I didn't fit into any of those. Because, I don't know, maybe because I didn't see things the same way that everybody did. I didn't accept the status quo of the way things were. I thought things could be different. From the time I was a boy, I was always looking at ways to change things and make something better in the world, right? And it's from these sorts of experiences that kind of guided me in my journey all my life here, leading me up to where we are today. Now, I used to think, I've been writing for years. I started actually writing the poems, like I said, in 2009, and at one time, it was 2008, it was like just one book. But now that's evolved into 4 books, actually 5 books that I've been working on over the years. So these things are a process. And everything happens when it's supposed to happen in divine timing. I used to think, wow, I could have published my book of poetry a few years ago, actually. But I didn't feel like I was done with it, for example. And I'm still probably not done. I'm sure I'm going to write more poetry. I wrote 2 poems last year, the final 2 that went into the book. And then I feel like it's complete. It's something I want to share with the world. The people who have heard those poems or that I've shared with is a very limited number of people. I used to be a speaker at a group back in Clearwater, Florida that we met every Saturday. And I was one of the key speakers in that event. But that was kind of my proving ground for a lot of these things and exploring that and sharing it with other like-minded individuals. So how do we create this opportunity out of chaos, right? Because change is chaos, right? It's a chaotic process. And if you think about science from, the second law of thermodynamics, everything goes to chaos, basically, in simple terms, right? Have you ever tried to keep your room picked up in order with the clothes, or at least try to get your kids to do that? It's impossible, right? Because you're going against the nature of the universe, the way things work. But you have to trust your own unique path. And even when, in doing that, people are going to look at you and go, what the hell is that guy doing? So it's like, trust your unique path. You have a divine blueprint that you were programmed with. Maybe you're not aware about it yet. If you're watching this, it's talking to you already. And it's like, what is it that you are here with through your gifts and talents to bring into the world that's going to, create a better experience for everyone? It could be something small, it could be big. It doesn't really matter. But for sure, you're going to run up against this consciousness that it doesn't make sense to others. So just remember this, there's nothing wrong with you. It's what's right with you that doesn't fit in the box, Okay? So what is this that we're running up against? This consciousness of energy or whatever, resistance that we have when we're going out into the world? Well, I call that the consciousness of mediocrity. And it has a certain energy. Everything has a vibrational energy to it. You know, like when you, for example, simply, or maybe you're looking at a beautiful sunset sitting on the beach and feeling the breeze, and you're just taking in that there's an energy to that. It feels good, right? And then, of course, there's some experiences that are not so great. And you run up against those and you go, this doesn't feel so good, right? And that's a lower vibrational energy. And if you think about down to the quantum level, everything is energy, okay? And what plays into this consciousness of mediocrity that wants to suppress transformation, essentially? And that's fear. There's really only two ways to go through your life. You can go through it in love, or you can go through it in fear. And so when you're in fear, and the general consensus for most people, they're sitting in fear all the time. They're afraid of change. And what they don't realize is they're making it harder on themselves. That's why I say change is inevitable. If there's any universal truth, scientific universal truth in the universe, it is that change is inevitable. But the suffering is optional. You don't have to suffer through that. Maybe you do, just so you can see in context what it should be like. But we've all been through massive change in our lives as we've moved through it. So, for example, I just share with a quick story. I was teaching chemistry at the University of South Florida in Tampa, USF, and I was an adjunct professor, and I'd just been signed on to teach organic chemistry. They had like a highly unusual amount of people, students enrolled that semester. It was like 50,000 people or something, and they were just overwhelmed. And then I signed my contract, I was ready to do that, and then I get this email from somebody else from another course or whatever saying, welcome proctors and graders. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? Well, they were looking for people to come and proctor the exams and then also grade the exams, for hours, for no pay. Now, of course, this was not in my contract, but this person who sent out the email to everybody just had this consciousness, just assumed that everybody's going to do that. Well, I had my years of doing that as a graduate student, grading exams. We called it indentured servitude, of grading exams and proctoring exams, when I was a graduate student. But that was a long time ago. I don't do that anymore. This is not that. So I like any times when it's something I don't think is right, I'm gonna say, sorry, but this is not cool, man. You can't just be expecting people to come here for hours and do that. So, but where did that come from? That came from this fear of how are they going to do this, take on this huge task and all that, and they just assume, instead of trying to engage people in a different way, it's the way they approach the change. They came from a place of fear, so they weren't able to really successfully move through that because of that. So again, this is this consciousness of mediocrity, I call it. And if you're going to be a change maker, if you're moving through something to make change in the industry that we're in, by the way, which I've done many times, you're going to run up against resistance. This is inevitable, okay? So let's dive in now to the 7 Changemaker practices, okay? And let's do a little deep dive in each one of these. So if you are going to move through to that and you want to embrace and empower that change, instead of being on the receiving end of that and not knowing what to do, why not you put yourself in the energetic position to create that change that you want to see in the world, right? So years ago, there was a book called How Rich People Think or something like that, and Stephen Seibel, I think, was the author or whatever. So some of this comes from that, I think. I don't remember, it was a long time ago, but it makes logical sense when you hear it, but it may not be something that's in your conscious awareness, right? It's part of your innate being or something like that, and energetically within you that some of these things are all, actually all of them are true, but you don't really connect with that or embrace that. So the first practice is don't romanticize about the past. Don't romanticize about the past. Stop trying to relive the old glory days, okay? You have to be present and focused on the moment you're in at this time. Not thinking about the past and not thinking about the future and trying to figure it all out, because that's what we do. We try to figure everything out. And that's the human experience. But if you really move into the space of being that spiritual being, having a human experience, you start to let go of those sorts of things and you let it flow. You don't have to know the how, but you have your focus forward to where you want to go and what you want to manifest in your life. Okay? So, and we do this, we go back and look at old photos. I've done this. I go back and look, and I remember the time frame and what was going on in my life at that time. And I think, and this is like years ago, and I go, wow, that was kind of cool, whatever. But that doesn't serve me in terms of where I want to go. It's nice to remember things, and it gives context, but also from those past experiences, what did you learn from them? Okay, what did you take away? Because everything that you go through in life is creating an experience for you to take something from that to move forward. Okay? So, don't romanticize the past. Number 2, strengthen your resolve against mediocrity. Okay, we just talked about this consciousness of mediocrity, this energetic presence that's in our society and culture and so on. And don't get pulled into that low vibrational thinking, right? Hold on to your frequency of this high vibrational where you want to be, regardless of who's around you, okay? And that may be tough to do sometimes, okay? In fact, it will be challenging many times because family, friends, whatever, primarily are going to be coming up against you when you're trying to make change in your life. And they're going to have their opinions of how they think you should be doing it. Right? Who's been there with that, right? But the reality is you have to be confident within yourself and strengthen your resolve. So when you do get pushed up, what do you do? How do you move through that? You can just say, if someone's making a comment, let's say somebody's saying, I think you're crazy, man. Why are you doing that? And you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't owe an explanation to anyone. All you have to do is kind of step back and say, thank you. I appreciate your input. And then you move forward. Now, there could be some spiritual breadcrumbs there of things that might be interesting. And then you take from that what serves you and leave the rest behind. So strengthen your resolve against mediocrity because it doesn't serve you in your path of where you want to go. And it's a low vibrational energy, as I said. And again, you'll know that when you're in it. You'll feel it. And remember, that change is inevitable, but the suffering is optional. You don't have to suffer through that, okay? Number 3, get comfortable with uncertainty. That's a big one. We all have trouble with that. Get comfortable with uncertainty. You don't need to know everything. You think you do. You think you control all that, but that's an illusion. Embrace not knowing the outcome. This is a true spiritual practice of going with the flow. If you go back to ancient teachings like the Tao Te Ching, it's really about being in the flow, right? Now you have a goal of where you want to go. You set your goal for that, and where you get into the suffering phase is that you have expectations for a certain outcome for whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then it doesn't happen. And then what happens? Then you go, Then you go, no, this is, you feel bad about it. I said, no, it's supposed to happen this whatever. I can tell you dozens of times in my life where I've done that. I've set the expectation. I thought for sure this is going to happen. And it doesn't happen. And you're disappointed, and then you get into this low vibrational energy and you go, what happened? No. I've learned to not do that anymore. So there's one thing about being expectant, which means you have a goal of where you want to go, what you want to achieve, or what you want to change in your life, and you hold your focus on that, but you don't set any expectations on how it's going to happen or what the outcome looks like. This is where the magic happens, all right? You know, all the permutations and variables energetically on a spiritual path are fluid. And to think that we actually have the conscious ability, our egos think this, to control all that is crazy. It really is an illusion. It's much better to enjoy the journey. So, for example, you know, every story that I've ever read about scientific discoveries, it never happened in a straight line from point A to point B, going on a certain path, and boom, there I set the discovery, there it is. No, it never happens that way. It always happens on the peripheral. So it's really about enjoying the journey and accepting this energetic flow of moving through it and being excited about that and say, okay. So it's funny, I can look back at times when I thought something really big was going to happen, and I was re-listening to my talks on the other Spotify channel from years past, and I started listening to those. Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember thinking that this was going to be like huge or whatever, but actually most of the times it's not. All it is just one part of the journey of where you're going ultimately. And even where I'm sitting today, of what I see before me in terms of books published, public speaking, TED Talk, those things are unfolding and will happen at a certain time. But what happens beyond that, I don't really know. And, you know, how that's going to impact or whatever. So, again, just remember to get comfortable with uncertainty. Always go back, revert back to your spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, whatever works for you, to center yourself and go within to that still small voice within that talks to you, and sit in that when you get in these situations where you don't know what to do. And I don't care where you are in your spiritual path, you're always going to have to deal with that. So get comfortable with that uncertainty, because even though you think you're on the spiritual path, I've been meditating for decades. And even myself sometimes runs up in situations in my life that seems like, okay, but now I don't sit in that anymore. I move through it very quickly and I shift the energy, okay? So develop your spiritual practice so that you can move through those moments of uncertainty. Number 4, put on your compassion glasses. Don't respond from anger or judgment about any situation. You have absolutely no idea what's going on in anyone else's life. You're not there. You're not walking their shoes. It's so easy for us to judge and move into that energetic space and think you know better. And, you know, I'll give you kind of a dangerous example. A good friend of mine was down the highway, and we've all experienced people driving like crazy, and the road rage you've seen in the news, and people shooting and all that kind of stuff. Well, that stuff really happened. So my friend was driving down the highway, and this guy cut him off, and then he was racing behind him, and he pulled up next to him, the guy was pointing a gun at him through the window. So don't respond with anger or judgment when you're faced with these sorts of situations, okay? See everyone as a soul at a different point in their evolution. That's really important. And everyone is on their own journey. Everyone is on their own path. And so take a step back from that, rather than go into anger or judgment. And if you are getting angry, and we all do, it's part of the human experience, then shift your energy, take a pause from that, whatever. Never send an email in anger to anyone. I've written many emails just as a way of processing, but never sent them. So, you know, just as an example. But again, see everyone as a soul at a different point in their evolution. Now, you're going to resonate with people who are like-minded that are on your journey, who will connect with what you're saying, and you'll have other people that will be resistant to that, won't be in your life. That's okay. Everybody's on their own journey. All right? Number 5, dream big. Okay? So I've always been a dreamer from the time I was a little boy. I had dreams of I was going to do big change in the world, do big things in the world. I didn't know what it was, but I just had this energetic feel that I was going to make changes. And as I started early, my early part of my life, I used to think, like I said, we hold on to something, set expectations. We do that. This is before my evolution or awakening in my spiritual practices. But again, there was still this excitement of holding on to a vision and feeling that energetically. So dream big, hold on to that vision with feeling, and feel it energetically within you. Let it permeate through all your body and your cells and your soul. And energy, because when you move into that energy space, energy precedes reality. In other words, whatever you energetically feel, you will manifest in your life, good or bad, by the way. If you sit in a place of bad energy in terms of something bad's going to happen, well, guess what? That's going to happen in your life probably. So be mindful of your thoughts, because everything has an energy attached to it. Every thought has an energy attached to it. Every thought is creative, like I said, either good or bad. So hold on to those big dreams. Hold on to those things that you really want to achieve. And those are like it's like on the golf course. You can see the flag on the hole. Boom, there it is. You put that flag down in the hole. That's where you're going. Now, you don't know how you're going to go down the fairway. It doesn't matter, but enjoy the journey and go do that. Number 6, lead with your heart. Okay, approach all interactions with love. So important to do that. Now, I've had, there's some stories I could share here on this one, but to keep it brief, and again, this ties to number 4, which was your compassion glasses, right? And knowing that every soul is on a different point in their evolution. Well, if you're leading in some way, leading others and guiding them, approach that from a place of love. Not from fear, from a place of love. That has a vibrational energy that will attract those that need to hear whatever it is you're doing or whatever it is you're trying to achieve as a team, let's say, or whatever that is. Always lead with your heart, okay? Number 7, this is the last one. Never quit. Whatever you dream of, never quit. The only way you ever lose is when you stop. And again, I've already said this, your mantra should be, you don't have to know how, you just have to know it's possible, right? And I believe for everyone, I've always had this belief since I was a kid, that anyone could achieve anything they wanted if they just applied themselves to that. Now, and that's probably why I've never been afraid to try so many things in my life, and it's probably why people over the years have called me Renaissance Man over many occasions over the years. And it's like people looked at me and say, Bill, is there anything you can't do? Well, the reality is, no. If it's something you're interested in doing and you want to do it, well, then go do it. Don't think, I don't have any training for that. I don't have any experience for that. And this is where you will run up against that consciousness of mediocrity, because people are going to be resistant to that. Look, I've lost jobs, or people didn't hire me because they were in a mediocrity energy, and they saw that I would come in and make a lot of change. And it was in a positive way, but they were resistant to that. And they didn't want to see that because they wanted to keep their own little space the way it is and just kind of grow a little bit. Well, that's thinking small. So dream big and never quit. This is how you win. This is how you move through your life. This is how you do big things. And again, it doesn't matter what the changes you want to create in your life. It could be change in a relationship. It could be change in a job. It could be change in, and it doesn't matter how old you are either, okay? I used to get hung up on that, ageism, right? It's like, I'm too old to do that now. Baloney. You can do that. Never quit. The only way you lose is to stop. Now, there's a fine distinction here, by the way, of trying to make something work versus not quitting, okay? And so what I mean by that is you're getting signs, you're getting those spiritual breadcrumbs that say, hey, dude, don't try and do this anymore. This is not going to serve you. But you think that you're not going to quit because you want to make that happen. So at some point in there, when you get enough signs, and this is where you learn to spiritually discern those signs, and the only way you get to that is to really develop your spiritual practice, and then you'll know if this is something you want to continue on. And maybe it's just simply a pivot, just like I'm doing right now. I'm pivoting to, I thought about going back in to get a job and heading up innovation for a company or whatever. Well, that's not happening. And I accepted that. I said, you know what? That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And you know that. Inherently, you will know that on some level. So follow those signs. Be able to spiritually discern what's being presented before you. And then you'll be able to make that change and move through that in a positive way and an easier way to do that. Now, it doesn't matter what it is, but learn to develop this. It comes from developing your practice to discern what things you need to pivot on or just stop altogether. And when one door closes, another door opens in terms of opportunity. So sometimes we stay in that first part and we end up suffering because we resist the change that we know we need to do. So never quit. All right. So those are the 7 practices for being a change maker. Okay. And if you want to get more information on this, I invite you to, or actually develop this practice yourself. What I recommend is really start, if you don't journal. If you're not meditating, learn to meditate. Move into these space of, these are the first easy steps to do. Okay. And then think about it just today after today's podcast and what of these 7 practices are you being called to deepen today? What is it you know? If you're listening to this right now, you're already thinking of something that you know needs to change. But you're not sure how to move through that. So you have to have faith. You have to trust in the process. You need to embody these practices as part of your being, of who you are, and that's how you move through your journey as a spiritual being having a human experience. Okay? So let me close with our podcast here and talk things that you can do. Know this, you are already a change maker, and these practices just help you remember. Okay, so there's just a tool. If you want to get a takeaway for these, what I talked about today, you can go back and listen to this podcast. It'll be on the website, YouTube channel, and all the other platforms. You can drop me an email, tag me. Please follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X now. So you can find those links on the website. And then, of course, join me every Sunday here now. I'll be streaming live on LinkedIn and also Facebook right now. I'm streaming live to both every Sunday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So let me close with this. You're not here to play small. You're here to be the vibrational change this world desperately needs. This is your mission. This is what you're supposed to do. Thank you for joining me today. And it's been a pleasure relaunching the podcast here. It's exciting. And super excited about the topics that I'm coming up. And it'll be excerpts from previous talks I've given, or it'll be from my books that I'm working on that I'm getting ready to do. So again, this year we've got Divine Whispers coming up very shortly, next week or two. And then the 5 Keys probably in the next few months. And then Quantum Grace, Contemplations for the Spiritual Journey. Been compiling that. I probably will publish that towards the end of the year or maybe next year. And then the final book, which will come sometime later, and that's called Spiritual Inheritance, Merging Generations of Divine Wisdom. And I'll share some of that in future podcasts of what that's about. So again, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and have a blessed day with love and gratitude. I'm Dr. Bill.